Here we go. Take two. Welcome to the Get On Point Business Podcast, where I talk with entrepreneurs, founders, and business owners to explore their journeys, lessons, and insights, as well as uncover the stories behind the successes and challenges of building a business. I'm Jason Mundy, a Focal Point certified business and executive coach, operating advisor, and fractional chief marketing officer, as well as the founder and president of On Point Business Advisors. Today, I'm excited to welcome a very special and important guest, Mike Brunick. Mike is the founder and CEO of Valor Advisors. But more than that, Mike is a fellow Focal Point business and executive coach, my business partner. I work with Mike under his business, Valor Advisors. He's also a client of mine, and I consider him a good friend. Mike and I are both tech industry veterans where we worked as go-to-market executives. Mike has a fascinating background, and we'll talk about Valor today, but we're going to take a little bit of a different approach, and that will dive deep into a very important and timely topic, especially for founders and business owners. How to identify, hire, and develop high-performing salespeople. This is an age-old question, and there are countless methodologies, systems, and books on this subject coming out all the time. It's mind-boggling. However, Mike has a unique perspective on this, having been a multi-time chief revenue officer and chief customer officer. And he's actually developed a behavioral science-backed approach and methodology. So Mike, welcome to the show and thanks for being my guest. I'm really excited about this one today.
Thanks, Jason. Super happy to be here, man. It's great to see you.
Awesome, as always. So Mike, let's start off with your background. You were in the military. You're a veteran. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
You were a Marine Corps officer. So
That's right.
talk to us about that and take us through that journey, what you did, how you went into the corporate world and went into the tech industry, and then ultimately founded Valor.
Sure. So just a little bit about my background. As Jason said, I had the opportunity, the privilege, frankly, of becoming a Marine Corps officer, a Marine Corps infantry officer directly out of college. I served as a second lieutenant and a first lieutenant, second Marine Division, both in 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, and 2nd Light Armored Infantry. And it was in 2nd LAI Battalion that I was involved in Operation Desert Storm in 1991. When I returned from Desert Storm, the Marine Corps sent me to Camp Pendleton, California, to become the commanding officer of the Light Armored Reconnaissance School, and to be the person to bring all of the new tactical advances that we had learned in theater, in operation, in combat, to bring that to Marine Corps doctrine. So I created the first LAV staff NCO and officers course at the Light Armored Reconnaissance School. At that point, I left the military at the end of that assignment, and I got a job actually working for one of the three-letter intel agencies in Langley, Virginia. And I was hired as a military analyst. My background in the military helped me analyze the strengths and weaknesses of foreign militaries. But it was really just a couple of months into that gig that they figured out that I had a knack for solving hard problems. And I was moved over to the Counterterrorism Center and was asked to solve a couple of really hard problems for them, technical problems. And it was there that I really learned computer software. Sort of taught myself in the evenings as I was learning the ins and outs of the agency, as well as, of course, what was going on in, at that point, narco-terrorism in South America. And I did that for a couple of years. I left there to become the director of a nonprofit organization. It was actually an outdoor adventure camp for at-risk adolescents. And we opened that camp. I saw it as another big problem to solve. It took over a 500-acre abandoned Boy Scout camp and turned that within about 9 months into a fully functioning organization. Served about 500 kids in the first year, passed our health inspections, and were able to serve food and house kids, and ran the whole thing on grants and donations. So maybe the hardest assignment I've ever had, including the agency and the Marine Corps, was spending a couple of years in the woods of Pennsylvania, basically helping to hew a camp out of really nothing but abandoned buildings and woods. And that ends the the give back portion of my background. I realized at that time, it's 1999, the dot-com boom was happening, and I wanted a part of it. So I moved to Austin, Texas, and I joined the software industry. And I stayed at my very first software company through all kinds of ups and downs and the bubble bursting and growth and acquisitions. And I stayed there for about 8 or 9 years. And I look back at that portion of my career. I think I had 7 or 8 job titles in 8 or 9 years. And the reason for that was just like as I described at the agency, I was identified as somebody who was good at solving problems,
Mhm.
was good at figuring out what needed to be done and creating new teams, hiring new teams, creating new systems and organizations, and really taking something from an idea into existence, exactly as I did with the kids at the camp in Pennsylvania. So fast forward quite a bit. That's enough detail about my background. I spent about 25 years in the tech industry, um, mostly as a sales leader and then a chief revenue officer 3 times and as chief customer officer. And about a year and a half or so ago, I realized that I'd had a nice run, was involved in some really nice exits, did some really great stuff. But as I look back on that, what I realized I loved was helping people solve problems, developing new leaders, developing new organizations, making systems work, figuring out how to create something from nothing or take something that was underperforming and make it perform well. So I started about a year and a half ago, working on my own, slowly building a team. Thank you, Jason, for joining the team. Valor Advisors is a firm that helps technology companies solve revenue problems. So we do that by looking at the entire go-to-market engine from product market fit to positioning and messaging to lead generation, demand generation, lead qualification, all the way through the sales process to close, to delivery, to retention, renewal, expansion, and advocacy. And look at that entire, call it customer life cycle, and figure out where it's working and where it's got some sticking points that needs to work better, and then helping our clients to tune that engine, to develop a new sales process or improve retention or to generate more leads or wherever it is in the system we find the gaps to be.
So that's like just the first part of your career there is like impressive in and of itself. And then to do what you did with the nonprofit and then moving into the tech world, absolutely amazing. There's a common thread there, right? Leadership, developing people, developing high performing teams. Obviously, that is critical in the military, and then solving difficult problems. And so it really makes sense, and it's almost come full circle with Valor. It's an honor for me to be able to work with you and be part of Valor as well, and to help others and help business owners solve problems. So that's incredible. I know we're doing some really great stuff with Valor, but
Mhm.
let's transition in. Let's dive into this topic, right? How do you how do you identify, hire, and then develop great salespeople, right? And have high performers. And we all know that there are some salespeople who are good at some parts of it, like the early part of identifying opportunities. Those are like your BDR type people. Then you've got your relationship people in the middle. And then you got your closers, right? And there's all different methodologies that are out there. In particular, Challenger, right, which is incredibly popular with tech companies and
Mhm.
startups and PE-backed companies. But there's so many approaches to this. There's so many gurus out there and so-called experts, new books coming out all the time, um, new formulas, right? You name it. But you've been doing this for a long time. You've had success with it. You know it works. You've hired people. You know who the good ones are. Um, and now you've taken what we've learned as, part of being focal point coaches to deliver behavioral assessments, right? Which is foundational in coaching. And you've taken that and you shaped it into a methodology to be able to identify, right, the right characteristics. of what makes a great salesperson. So I kind of said some of it there, but talk us through that. Tell us what that's
Yeah.
all about. How does it work?
Yeah, of course. In fact, the right place to start probably is with the business problem, right? We in our work, we talk to folks all the time about focusing on the customer's business problem. You sell more, you get more leads, you market better, you retain more if you're focused on their business problems and not your products. So let me start there. Let me take my own medicine here. So
Yep.
what business problem were we trying to solve? So in our work at Valor Advisors, we work with a lot of companies to talk about their revenue gaps. And as I said, we look at it the entire life cycle. Invariably, the conversation at some point goes toward the sales organization and the sales team. And specifically within the sales team, the question we hear all the time is, yeah, but how do I know if they're good? How do I know if I've got good sales guys? Um,
Mhm.
Most of the people we talk to are CEOs, CFOs, boards, which are a lot of finance guys, people who love numbers. And they say, look, what we hate about this problem of not knowing if the sales problems, if the revenue problems are people or process or product, what is causing the problem, is they just can't measure the people in any way other than the most obvious, which is how did they do last quarter? How did they do last year? So high performers are identified by those folks who made their quota, and low performers are identified as those folks who didn't make their quota. And so we look at an organization with some mixed results, some high performers, some low performers, some folks in the middle. Um, and the question that we get asked, rightfully, perfectly legitimate question, the right question to ask is which people do we keep and develop through great sales training, like we deliver new methodologies, new processes, bring systems in around them? Which ones do we support to make better? And which ones do we decide this person doesn't really have it? Um, and so the question comes up, is there such a thing as sales DNA? Is there such a thing as a person who's just naturally inclined, has the traits, has the characteristics, has the personality, the behavior, the drive, those things that make a good sales rep? And the answer is yes. Anybody who's been a top rep, anybody who's managed sales organizations or been around them in other parts of the organization can always say, that guy seems like he's a good sales guy, or that girl over there seems like she's really got it. In fact, in our world, Jason, we, run into a young BDR and you think, man, there's something about her. I think she'd be a great enterprise rep. We're gonna get that person and groom them for a sales role. So there is definitely something. The problem is it's like art or pornography, right? You can't define it, you can't measure it, but you know it when you see it. And
Right. Right.
that's the answer
Mhm.
that a lot of our sales leaders give. And that's the answer that a lot of our supervisors, CEOs, board members, investors, that's the answer they hate the most. The trust me, I know it when I see it.
And
Uh,
they want to look at quota, and we know that if a sales rep like hits or exceeds quota, there's so many other factors involved, right?
that's right.
You
That's
you
right.
have a good rep in a bad territory, you could have market headwinds, competitive pressures, bad product market fit. I mean, you name it, or positives, right? And that could be leading to what that metric is all about. So that is not necessarily the right thing to only be looking at.
That's right. It's the only lens that we have to look through. And it's not a bad lens, but as you said, there's a lot of things that go into somebody being a top performer, somebody being a marginal performer. You could be the world's greatest sales guy and you're told to go sell finance systems to all the toy manufacturers in South Dakota, and your entire territory is three companies. And you could be an average sales rep and be told, your job is to sell to banks in Lower Manhattan, and you've got a happy hunting ground around. So territory matters, quota matters. Um, you got to look at a company where, 75% of the sales guys miss quota, and you think like, wow, their quota's set right. And you go to company B and, 90% of the sales guys make quotas, and you say, I think maybe your quotas are too low. So that number's not great either.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are a lot of things that go into somebody being a top performer. But one of them most certainly is capability. Does this person have what it takes? And so I was fascinated by that question and started the research. And the research was inspired, as you said, in part by, our work getting different certifications, and certified as executive coaches and certified as trainers and different administrators. One of the certifications that I have, and I know you have as well, is with a company called TTI that does these amazing behavioral science assessments. And so, as an authorized reseller and facilitator of TTI assessments, I've seen some really great work that they've done, capturing everything about a person. So what's their decision-making style? What's their communication style? How do they behave in stress situations? What's their emotional intelligence? What are their core competencies? What are their internal drivers that even they may not be aware of? The things that drive them and make them happy that they gravitate toward, and on and on. All of this amazing information. And so I realized we had piles of information available about individuals after just a short 20, 25-minute, fairly low cost assessment. I could have a pile of information about the person. And I started wondering, is there any signal amongst all that noise? What are those things that make somebody um, capable, suitable for a sales job, or more specifically, to be a top performer within that sales job? So I started the research, and it turns out there is some great data out there. And then I've done some of my own research. I've talked to a number of CROs, done a lot of interviews, gone through a lot of data, and we have now distilled those pieces of information. You think about a pile of information, thousands of data points about a single person. There are a dozen or so pieces of information that, if extracted from the pile, combined and weighted in the right way using a proprietary formula that we developed, fed into an AI engine that understands them in their totality, but understands our research and our formulas, to be able to say, all right, I'm able to generate a score from 0 to 100, which is the likelihood that that person will be a top performer in sales. They have the characteristics to be a top performer. And that number, that score that we generate, we have gone to market with as the rep fit score. So the rep fit score tells you their fitness to be a great
Mhm.
sales rep. And we use sales rep as a very generic sales term. We give this assessment to BDRs and sales engineers, account executives, account managers, sales leaders, and certainly sales executives or sales reps of all different stripes. So it's valid across the spectrum of sales deals. And in addition to producing a score of 1 through 100, we also produce various pieces of information, like their likely selling style, their sales archetype, as you said before. Are they influencers? Are they technicians? Are
Mhm.
they closers? Um, it's a combination of lots of pieces of information. As I said, a dozen or so key data points that bring together a really clear readout about where that person is strong.
So you could actually take somebody who you think has great potential. You kind of know it, but they haven't really proven themselves yet, and run them through the rep fit methodology and model, and identify, are they going to be a great salesperson? Do they have the right fitness, as you said, or the capability? But also, what type of role they'd be best suited for? Are they a BDR? Are they a sales engineer? Are they that hard closer, right?
That's
Um,
exactly right. And remember, what we're measuring here is potential.
Mhm.
The sort of hypothetical, you find a Mongolian goat herder, and you give him a test and you say, wow, this person could be a great sales rep. Much in the same way that if you handed 100 random people who'd never seen a baseball before, you hand them a baseball and you tell them all to throw the ball a dozen times and you watch them. Most of us with our eye would be able to say, hey, that person's never thrown a baseball before, but that's not bad. They're a natural. It goes without saying that in that baseball example, they're not yet baseball players. What we've talked about is potential. Um, so what we've done with RepFit is to say, does this person have the characteristics, the traits, the drive, the behaviors, the communications? Do they have what it takes to be a top performing sales rep? Um, there are certainly people who perform already in the job, already well trained, perform under their capabilities or perform over their capabilities.
Mhm.
But we found that those variations aren't as great as you might think they are, that this predictor for capability is really accurate. We can improve everybody's performance with better training or better systems, improve their results with better products, more leads, of course. But the point here is give yourself a second lens to look through, other than just how did they do last quarter? How did they do last year? This is a lens to look through to say, gosh, this person on paper is going to get everything it takes to be a top performer. I'm going to take another look at their territory. I'm going to invest a little bit more in training. Or
Mhm.
I got somebody whose numbers are not very good, and then I look at their rep fit score, their capability score, and say, yeah, my worst suspicions were confirmed here. They really don't have what it takes. And so it allows people to maybe confirm what
Mhm.
they knew, and have a way to look at an entire organization, stack rank them by their rep fit score. And then what gets really exciting is you say, I'm going to do some top leveling. I'm going to take some folks off the bottom, and I'm going to start interviewing candidates. And once I have a picture of where my organization stands, I start interviewing individual candidates. And before I hire them, I have them take a 25-minute assessment and I get a rep fit score on them. And now I say, ooh, I know where that candidate's likely to land in my pile of folks. They're going to be a middle of the packer. They're going to be near the top. They're really a lot like these top performers I have. Or, gosh, this person looked good on paper. They had a pretty good resume, but they're really no better capability wise than the people that I'm replacing. So it answers some really specific questions about how I should deal with individuals in my organization.
And it's absolutely awesome and fascinating. By the way, I think you might have identified a new source of where we can find talent, right? We maybe perhaps we should be helping our clients by having them look at Mongolia and
Mongolia is the place. Yeah.
picking out those goat herders because I think there's quite a bit of them. Um, but seriously though, I love the fact that it's behavioral science backed, and we know being certified in administering TTI assessments. The TTI goes back like 45, maybe close to 50 years. There is a massive volume of data behind it.
That's right.
And so there's a ton of research and a ton of data that supports this. And it's scientific, right? It's objective. It's not just subjective, that gut feel that we have to take when that's all we really have to assess people. So really incredible. And I love the fact that you also are you've taken the methodology and you have an AI learning model and agent behind this that you've trained, right, with the data and with the
Mhm.
methodology to support it. Um, the can rep fit also be used to identify if you're using like a particular sales methodology or you're trying to find the right sales methodology for your top performers? Can it be helped to also identify what that would be?
Yeah, 100%. So what a client gets if they purchase rep fit from us is certainly they get the assessments for their entire sales organization, however number of folks they want to put through that. Each person gets a detailed 60-page report, which is a great management tool. All by itself, it's going to have an impact on performance. It teaches the manager and the employee how to communicate better, how to manage that person, what situations to put them in. Really valuable tool for one-on-one coaching and for developing paths to success for every employee. So all by itself, really super valuable. What RepFit does on top of that is provide the numerical score. Does not go to the individual. It goes to the management of the organization. So they get team profiles and team grids. They get a number of great visuals that are important to look at right away. Collections of archetypes of people and strengths and weaknesses. But what we also deliver then is a dedicated and trained conversational agent that's trained on their people. And we can start to ask it all kinds of questions like, should we try team selling? Is a pretty common question. You can look at the data. It will look at the data and say, yeah, you've got a great combination. You got folks that are really strong at the beginning and weak at the end, and other folks that are really weak at the beginning and strong at the end. And if we started to do some team selling, I think that would work with your team, or it's not going to work with your team because weaknesses are real similar. And so, the point of team selling is to pick up on each other's strengths. So that's an example. You mentioned methodology. The one that everybody asks about is Challenger. Like it's something like 40% or 40 of the Fortune 100 companies have adopted Challenger, a little bit less as you go down into some smaller markets, but Challenger, really popular methodology.
Mhm.
I think Challenger's great. I've worked for a couple of Challenger shops. I've done Challenger training. I'm not opposed to it, but I also know, especially with my relatively new background in doing these assessments and looking at behavioral science, that Challenger requires people who are comfortable making customers uncomfortable. And it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone to hear that there are certain behavioral types that are more comfortable making people uncomfortable than there are others. Some people get into sales because they're people pleasers and problem solvers. And it's really hard to take a people pleaser and tell them, no, 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 stop doing that. I know that's your nature, but stop doing that. I want you to try to make this person uncomfortable. Any sales manager who's tried to roll out Challenger to a large group of people will know that they have mixed success getting it to stick.
Mhm.
Uh, I believe, I'm a training guy, I believe you can train people to do just about anything, including to go against their nature. The question is, do you have the time to really change somebody's behavior? Because under stress, and a sales cycle is a stressful situation,
Mhm.
people revert to their nature. So we have a sales kickoff. It's 5 days. It's in some place. There's 3 days of rah-rah and, a little too much drinking and social events and, message from the CEO and product rollouts. And by the time the enablement team gets the sales reps, you've got 2 days left of the sales kickoff. And so the question is, in 2 days, can you really change somebody's behavior so that under stress, 6 months, 9 months later, they're going to revert not to their nature, but to the 2 days of training they got during sales kickoff? Obviously not. So that's why we have a mixed uptake, a mixed success, trying to turn non-challengers into challengers. So if you're already a challenger shop, maybe we can talk about what types of people should I be adding to the team? Not just are they great sales reps, not just do they have great rep fit scores, but are they the folks who can adopt our methodology? That's an important question to ask, and rep fit can answer. But maybe more to the point, you look at a sales team and you say, which methodologies would we be good at? Are we a good group to run Challenger? You're trying to run the wishbone offense, but you've got no running backs and a small offensive line. Is this the right formation? Is this the right philosophy for the roster that I have. I either need to match the philosophy to the roster or match the roster to the philosophy, but I can't just have a mismatch and call it a day. So it helps you to avoid those common pitfalls.
That's absolutely awesome. The I think that approach could be applied in so many other ways too, right? But obviously, starting here with sales, is RepFit available today? Is it in production?
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. We rolled out our first couple of customers here just this month, um, and we're raring to go.
That's awesome. So what's the plan to take it to market?
Yeah, initially it's an adjunct to the work that we do. So when Valor Advisors goes in and talks to clients about their revenue problems, we're able to answer one of the hanging previously unanswered questions. Do I have the right people in the sales team? Do I have the right people in the right positions in the sales team? Am I using them in the right way? So those questions can now be answered for those folks where we're already saying, hey, we're here to help you find out why you've got revenue gaps and where your go-to-market engine is getting stuck or doing fine. So we're able to answer those questions for those clients. Next for us is to make that available to folks just as a standalone product. So I don't need all your extra consulting. I don't need the workshops. What I need from you is really just this tool to analyze my team. So that's next. And then after that would be to make it distributable by other partners, other folks who do behavioral analysis and want to have a value add on top of that, to other folks who perhaps do sales training or other types of consulting to say, hey, this is going to really inform how we train or what we train on, or what we tell our clients to hire as in new people. We look at the whole thing. I think back to my days at the three-letter intelligence agency. And what we talked about a lot, I know people have heard this in the civilian world as well, is you want to collect a lot of information. And then you've got to do some work to turn that information into intelligence. The step above that, though, is synthesizing your intelligence into actionable intelligence.
Mhm.
Uh, and so I feel like behavioral analysis is a great way to gather information. And in fact, TTI does a great job in their reporting of turning a lot of that into, in fact, intelligence. What we've done with RepFit is take all of that information and that intelligence and synthesize it into actionable intelligence for our customers.
Absolutely awesome and fascinating. Yeah, actionable intelligence, actionable insights, something it's not just theoretical or academic in nature. You can act upon it, right? You can do something with it and make changes and actually make something happen, which is phenomenal. So I think there's tons of assessments out there, and a lot of them I feel are very, very academic in nature, right?
Mhm.
They sound good, they're great. You walk away and you kind of left scratching your head, like, all right, what do I do with this? I don't even know what that meant. Um,
Yeah.
and this is something that's pragmatic, it's practical, it can actually be applied.
Yeah, we talk a little bit about DISC profiles when we do our behavioral analysis assessments. And by the way, DISC is one of the data points that goes into RepFit. It turns out it's not a strong signal, but there is some signal there. There are DISC profiles that make people top performing sales reps and others that are just not represented among that cohort. So that is a signal we use. But we talk about DISC and we know that the high Ds, the folks who say, okay, just give me an answer. Okay, but just give me an answer. Stop talking. Uh, those people only make up about 7% of the global population. But if you hang out in the boardroom or the executive room of a large technology company, you go see the investors, you'd think the whole world was a D. They are there in spades. And so What we've done with RepFit is really friendly to those folks that say, just give me the answer. So I will look at everybody you got and I will give you a number from 0 to 100 as to whether or not they have the capability, the suitability for the sales profession and whether or not they're likely to be a top performer. So it's very friendly to the high Ds if you're familiar with DISC.
Yeah, totally. It's like it's completely objective and data driven, right? Is what they're looking for. Uh, Absolutely awesome. So if anyone in the audience is interested in learning more about this, or if they want to apply it, how can they find out more?
Yeah. Our website, Valor Advisors, and that's VALR Advisors. And there's a story behind that company name that maybe we'll talk about in a future pod. But valoradvisors.com is the website. Email address that they should reach out to is just info@valoradvisors.com. And there's a group of us that receive that, and you'll get a response right away. So again, it's info@Valor, VALR, advisors.com.
Awesome. And people can find you on LinkedIn as well if they want to connect.
That's right. That's right. I'm on LinkedIn, and they can send me a connection or an email request.
Awesome. Mike, that was absolutely awesome. Thanks again for sharing your story with us. There's so much more we could talk about. Definitely do another one of these. But thank you for explaining what Valor is, talking about your awesome background, and talking about RepFit. I am so excited about this, and really looking forward to working with our clients on it. So thanks again. And for the audience, if you're interested, check out valoradvisors.com. Get in touch with Mike, and I'd be happy to talk to you. So if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to the Get On Point podcast on YouTube and on Spotify, and connect with me on LinkedIn or at onpoint-advisors.com. Thank you for tuning in, and remember, get on point, unlock your growth potential, and transform your business.